Hi everyone, welcome to the second part of Chapter 4, John Rawls and the Rawlsian Ethics. So on your slide presentation, you want to move to that particular slide. I put a picture up there of John Rawls. Rawls was we understand him to be a very sort of famous philosopher who used his platform to talk about justice. And he is what we would call legal philosopher. Hobbes, the political philosopher, John Rawls, the legal philosopher. So again, here we're taking some of the inspiration and sort of the benefits that Rawls provides us with, and seeing how we can use these theories to apply to social and business ethics within the sort of workplace that we find ourselves in. So Rawls took that idea that we were talking about previously, social contract, where you give up something to get something, and this is really how communities function, how well-organized communities function. The social contract theory, what he does with the social contract theory is a little bit different. We would say probably radically different from the work of Thomas Hobbes. They're writing in two different time periods. But he was concerned with creating a state of equality. His major concern was how do we get things to be all equal? How do we get people to be perceived as equals? And this is today such a big sort of social issue that we see everywhere around us, with the Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, and the sort of what seems to be constant media that we hear in relation to what's at issue, equality, and in relation to how come people are not equal. Why can't we imagine a place or imagine a community where people are equal? And so what he wants to do is try to come up with some answers for the things we need to account for in order to have some sense of equality that's sort of better than where we are now, and the types of ways that we need to sort of move towards to get there, to arrive at sort of a full sense of equality in a given community. And we might say this also applies to the organization. Do I work for an organization or a company wherein all the employees, including the CEO, everybody in the company, are they all equals? And how do we know that the company sees them as equals? And what kinds of policies are centered around equality? So really, when we talk about a community versus the organization is a smaller scale activity that or smaller scale form of what's the big scale, the community. So organization is the micro, or the company is the micro, and community is the macro. And do we want equality? Yeah, of course we want equality in both of these areas. So he attempts to answer the questions that I've put on the slide and that are also included in your textbook on page 113. What kinds of things limit our freedoms? What kinds of things take away from our freedoms? He asks this question. Sometimes we have to put limitations. Sometimes we put limitations on our behavior, but also sometimes we have to recognize that people naturally have limitations and that they're not the same as us. Therefore, we have to make concessions in order for that to be become a reality. So I say that on the slide. What kinds of things limit our freedom? Sometimes we have limitations that were placed upon us, things that we didn't ask for, that we're going to talk about here, and they limit our freedoms. And we, as a result, we don't have the same kinds of freedoms that everyone else has. And we think about this is also applicable to what we would see in an organization. People are not all at the same sort of level in the workplace once we start looking at it through a sort of clearer lens. So, page 113, what are those kinds of limitations that are what we would call natural limitations to our freedoms, or what makes us not equal, what makes us unequal, and how are we going to fix those things. That's where we're sort of taking our thinking here. So Rawls refers to what we call contingent attributes. And here I'm reading from page 113 of your book. It says, children born into poverty or into dysfunctional families face barriers that children born into financially secure families and into supportive families never have to confront. Rawls calls these aspects of our lives contingent attributes. They are matters involving luck, or what he refers to as the natural lottery. We have to deal with these things, and we didn't have any sort of control over that. So when we take these when we put them into focus, they are what we might call natural inequalities. If we're naturally unequal, then what do we have to clarify? What do we have to fix in order to be able to get to a better sense of equality? And here he's going to talk about what those contingent attributes are and how they apply. So he says again, imagine that we want a place that's equal. What sorts of things do we have to account for? And so here I point you to your slide. An implied agreement or social contract intended to ensure equality and justice for all members of society, or you might add, an organization. How are we going to reach this? The first thing we have to do, number 1 on the slides, consider your contingent attributes. Anyone that has physical disabilities, anyone that has physical challenges, they should be accounted for. Psychological, intellectual, cultural, social, all of these things affect our state of natural equality, or they cause inequity among people. So again, here, what do we need to do? Rawls tells us, well, number 2, imagine an unbiased, original position, a condition of you not yet knowing our personal contingent attributes. Suppose you could not know anything about a person. Just pretend we're looking at the actions or the ways that people behave, not where they come from, so he calls this a veil of ignorance. We have to almost set up a veil in front of our sort of eyes so that we don't see the contingent attributes. If we want to be fair, if we want to create equality, we have to account for these contingent attributes. So, number 3, determine what moral and legal rules you would agree to in a state of ignorance, where you don't know all of these inequalities. What do you have to have that's in place that's going to guarantee everybody the same amount of equality, bearing in mind that we know that people have these contingent attributes? So, in addition to what we're talking about here in this social contract theory that he's telling us about, he is going to approach it different than Hobbes. He wasn't writing this during a war like Thomas Hobbes was. He was writing this doctrine and aiming towards a different outcome. And so what was he aiming towards? And I've put that on the next slide. What kinds of things was Rawls thinking about? Well, he said that he determined that all of us have 3 primary goods, that everybody holds these things in common. We all want to be healthy, number 1. We all want to have access to healthcare. So if someone has more access than we have, a lot of us will say that that's unfair. That's unfair, or that it is unequal, that it is the cause. So what is the cause of this inequity? Well, how come some people have better access to healthcare than I do? If we're living in a system like Canada, is it the case that some people have better access to healthcare than I do? And why is that? Well, if we all have the goal to be healthy and healthy equally and have equal access, then we have to put in structures to make sure that we can achieve that. And this is where his thinking is going. Secondly, he says we all want to be free. We all want to have the freedom to pursue interests, to pursue our own interests. You might liken this with the pursuit of happiness. I should be able to go out there and get, whatever I want. But he's putting a qualifier on this, number 2. He's saying it has to be within acceptable bounds. If you're going to go out there and get whatever you want and you're going to hurt other people, then that's probably not the type of freedom that we all would appreciate. So freedom has to have some limitations in terms of what you can and cannot do. You have to have the laws, and you have to have the sort of order like Hobbes would have told us about. What also do we need to sort of consider in creating equality? We need to guarantee opportunity to achieve secondary wants, wealth, through our own efforts. So we want everyone to have the same opportunities. If it is the case that some people have contingent attributes that hold them back from achieving the same things that we can achieve, then they don't have the same opportunity. So these are things that get added into Rawls's sort of complete idea. How would we apply contractarianism on the next slide? Consider a rule at work or in school which you do not agree with. Ask yourself, why do I consider it to be wrong? Under what circumstances would you appreciate this rule? And you ask these questions. If you did not know what your contingent attributes would be, would you make this rule? If not, what rule would you make? Right? Does your rule protect the primary goods of everyone concerned? So when we think about something like this, I often say a lot of companies, organizations have their employees wear uniforms. I could say in education, that's, a lot of times it's the case where you have to attend a school, and you don't have to, of course, but you make a choice to attend a school that has a uniform. So you think about some of the philosophy behind all employees wearing uniforms, and all people at a high school, let's say, wearing uniforms. What kinds of benefits are there to that? And what kinds of consequences or costs are there to that? We might say, well, the benefits are, if you are living in a family that doesn't have a lot of money, and you have to wear the same uniform as somebody else that may be in a lot better financial sort of condition than you are, then you're not going to recognize that immediately if everyone's wearing uniforms. So uniforms have the benefit of sort of creating equality, at least in appearance. And that's sort of a philosophy that some would argue is good. Of course, others would disagree with it. But this is the thinking that we're pulling away from contractarianism, and in application. What can we do for the whole of the company? What kinds of things do we need to focus on to create equality in the company outside of maybe appearance? But appearance might be the first step, right? So something for you to think about. If you move to the next page, you're going to see the last part of what I'm going to talk about here, just to sort of highlight on some of these ideas. The Rawlsian ethic works like this. There's the example I read in the examples in your book. It's true that children are born into poor families, at least sometimes. Children are also born into the world with mental disabilities and physical disabilities and so forth. So if we know this, then we know that those people are not going to have the same opportunities, that the way that we envision equality can't just be the same. It can't continue in the same condition without making some changes. And again, we use the workplace to apply here as well. We imagine we could exist without these attributes. If we could, that would be our original position. In our original position, we sit behind a theoretical veil of ignorance, as I was saying before. It's like setting up a wall where we can't see what people, we can't see what their appearance is, and we have to assume that not everybody comes to the table with the same set of tools, and that's just the sort of natural condition of humanity. So we have to account for it if we're going to get to equality, which is the ultimate sort of goal of Rawlsian thought. And our application to the workplace, this is something that we could use to in a practical sense in different scenarios. So therefore, we can make the best decisions, formulate the best moral rules, while at the same time be rational and self-interested according to Rawls. What we need to do is step back and think about what we want to achieve. And if equality is something we are looking for and something that we praise, that we aim towards, whether it be as an organization or as a community, or for our purposes as ethical practitioners to think about ways to make a sort of workplace more equal, then we consider Rawlsian ethic to have a lot of value. I'm going to leave it right there, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about feminist ethics in the next video for Chapter 4. Thanks.